Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign world. It's Friday, so we have a Khyber Shards answers for you today. I am solo again. We're in the middle of kind of a large combat, and I don't think any of the players can really join in to answer questions without having a hard time not spoiling how the combat plays out in the end. So I want to talk about big encounters. This is a very large combat, probably the largest we've had on a map, especially in Khyber Shards so far, with about a dozen Sahuagin spread across the map, as well as a couple of significant threats in Tommel and the Sahuagin Baron. We had some friendly NPCs involved. It's a bit of a thing. So we have some questions about this, and I'm going to use those to kind of guide the conversation. I want to talk a bit about ways to do this well, but also things I think I could have done better in this particular encounter, because there are some things I noticed even while we were running it, and especially in watching it back because I've edited and joined the watch parties, that I look at it and I'm thinking I could improve that. I could have made that smoother, easier to run, easier to play, just in a lot of different ways. So first question comes from Darren. When you design a big combat encounter, how do you ensure that non-spellcasters have opportunities for meaningful contributions? So I think one of the big weaknesses of D&D's design, especially in all editions that aren't 4th edition, yeah, bring it, is that martial characters who don't have access to Fireball, have a very limited utility, or can have a very limited utility in a very large combat encounter. On the other hand, the flip side of that is, with many characters involved in the melee, that does make it tricky for your spellcasters to use their big AoE attacks, because it risks harming their friends if they're not a sorcerer who can do careful casting and that sort of thing. So that is a very good question. With this campaign, I've never felt like it was much of a problem. For one, even our current caster, Ari, plays up in melee most of the time, being a Hexblade. So it hasn't been too much of a problem with this particular party makeup. Some ways to do it, though, that I think make it better are big maps that spread the action out so that the enemy aren't exclusively clustered together, where they are prime targets for a fireball. So your casters can target groups of enemies, but they can't target all the enemies at once. And so there's going to be enemies for your martial characters to deal with as well. I think that's one good way to do it. Another is by making good use of terrain effects, cover and walls and things like that. Making your space not just an arena will mean that your spellcasters can't always target everything, and things have cover, and things are invulnerable from various things because there's a wall between you and the fireball or something like that. And so your fighter can go over and take on those while your spell slinger is still throwing spells at other enemies. Um, Another way, and this is not something I did, but I kind of wish I had, is by smaller, grouping lesser enemies into minion groups. This is an idea that was present in 4th edition. It's present in the Genesis RPG that we use for Eberron Renewed over on that podcast. And it's present in a few other RPGs that have picked it up from 4th edition and from Genesis. Basically, instead of having 12 Sahuagin, I could have 3 groups of 4 Sahuagin, or 4 groups of 3 Sahuagin that would be essentially a swarm. They would share a hit point pool. They would share 1 attack roll. It would mean you have fewer initiative slots to make your way through, or if you've got them grouped on an initiative slot, which I do, why not have them grouped on a single roll, which I didn't do. That's one thing I really wish I had done, is built the basic Sahuagin into swarms, small into clusters of Saugen who all had 1 hit point, 1 attack, 1 damage, all of that stuff, or even like some swarms do, automatic damage from there. Minions is a concept from 5th edition that's present in Flea Mortals by Matt Colville. It's present in other things where you have groups of minor baddies who are there to fill out an encounter. They're still dangerous. They're still of a level to harm the player characters, but they have a very, very small number of hit points each, so that a character like Pog with 2 attacks can carve through a couple of them in a single attack and get sort of the feel of the area of effect attack and get the very epic sensation, especially at high levels. So I think those would be good ideas. So I kind of wish I had clustered them into swarms or built them as minions, or something like that. I think that would have moved things along quicker. And I could have thrown even more Saugen onto the board that way and given it a really, really epic feel without bogging the fight down. So that's really the big danger of a big fight, of course, is bogging the fight down into lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of rolls. So I think clustering bad guys into groups can help with that. And also, when you have a swarm of Saugen, Pog isn't attacking 1 Saugen while your wizard with Fireball is attacking 5 or 6 at a time. Pog is attacking 5 or 6 Saugen. He's just doing it in the form with an axe. And so it kind of gives that epicness to even martial characters. And then Emily and Darren both also asked a related question. Emily says, how do you feel about assigning a friendly NPC to a number of hostile NPCs and then just leaving them like that for the entire fight, assuming the PCs don't intervene, only for the friendly NPC to finally kill their foes right after the PCs finish the rest of the fight? On the one hand, I find that this makes things easier, but I'm sure it isn't as dynamic as it could be. And then Darren asked, how do you decide when to ask your players to roll dice for NPCs? I think these are, so what's the way of involving NPCs? I involved 3 friendly NPCs in this fight, Solarka, Ilya, and then Thora. And I wish I'd done that slightly differently, because I don't want friendly NPCs to necessarily take the full complement of actions. 1, because I don't want to steal the spotlight from the player characters, and 2, because it slows things down. On the other hand, especially a character like Thora, we've never seen her fight. I wish I had her do things that were more showing off what she was capable of. And that's hard to balance. Again, Matt Colville, if you've read his Strongholds and Followers, he creates a system of follower characters, of companions, that have very basic health states instead of hit points so you're just tracking whether they're fine, injured, or down, or something like that. And have a sort of signature action that they can take on their turn, that in some way bolsters the party, or in some cases just damages enemies. But it gives them something flavorful to do without taking up a whole bunch of time and without the need to build out that NPC as a full player character. So that's a tricky balance to have. So one thing Emily suggests is you kind of have the battle going on in the background, where we say, and we kind of narrate, and in the background you see Ilya, she's carving through the Saugen and she's fighting her way through and she's screaming her battle cry, and Solarka's by her swinging this big flaming axe, that sort of thing. And you just kind of make it narrative. It's happening in the background. It's scenery to the fight that the PCs are involved in. I think that works great, and it's especially great for like genuine battles. If you're playing in a campaign where your PCs are actually involved in like a military battle, that's a great way to do it, is to keep things in the background. What I don't like about it is what Emily points out, is it is less dynamic. And in particular, it means that the stakes are very, very different. That background fight isn't really taking up or isn't really playing a role in the outcome of this encounter. How the player characters are going to make all the decisions. And while you want the player characters to kind of be key to whether we win or lose, I like for the things that are going on around them to impact it. And yeah, you can assign them to a group of NPCs, of hostile NPCs, but you've if you've accounted for that in your encounter design, then those NPCs might as well never have been an option for the players to attack. It's just that's the group that Solarka and Ilya are fighting over there. Um, so reasons not to do that. Reasons to do that, it is much simpler. It works very well as background setting, and it gives you the feel for the story of those NPCs being involved, but not necessarily taking up time and space on your table. The reason not to do that is it takes the stakes of that part of the fight away. And this is where I would answer Darren's question. When do I let the players roll dice for the NPCs? When I'm willing for the NPCs to get hurt. I want the players to see the rolls being made by the friendly NPCs so that they know it's not just me narrating, it's really happening. We're really rolling dice for these characters. It also gives the feel of those NPCs being more involved and gives players something to do between their turns, which I also like, keeping them a little more engaged, hopefully. Even better than what I did, where I just let them roll the dice, is if I had handed over a little basic minimalist stat block for those characters for them to run in the encounter. That would have been an even better method. But in the moment, as I was designing it, there were so many other things I just didn't think to get that part done. So I was just relying on my notes for that, and letting them roll the dice. But it brings them involved. But it also lets them see the stakes. Lets them see that the NPCs really might fail, succeed, might really get hurt. It frees me up to, I think, it gives me narrative permission to actually attack the friendly NPCs. Most of the time, I wouldn't necessarily attack Solarka or Ilya, but in this circumstance, yeah, it adds stakes, it adds gravity to the situation because you have friends in danger now who aren't the other player characters. It also occupies some of the attacks. It allows you to modulate the danger of the encounter mid-encounter by shedding some of those attacks onto friendly NPCs rather than all of them going to the PCs. If Ilya and Solarka hadn't been taking attacks, Pog or Shade would have been taking 3 extra attacks from Saugin every single round, and so that makes a big difference. You want the friendly NPC to be able to do something distinctive to them, though, and I think that's where I failed. Ilya worked okay because she's got the double scimitar, and so getting that little extra bonus action attack that worked really well. I don't think I did well with Solarka. It didn't give Solarka's attacks much flavor. She was using the axe she made for Pog, and so that helped. And then I really don't think I did a great job of this with Thora. The real problem with bringing NPCs in is what happens if they're just completely ineffective. Like, what if you get into a really bad set of rolls? Then you are actually just bogging down the fight even more than you were by adding an extra initiative slot. So it's tricky. And I think the best form of it is for an NPC stat block, an allied NPC stat block, to not be fully fleshed out, to be a couple of actions that are distinctive and flavorful, and the things needed for attacks. You don't necessarily need all of their skill checks for a combat like this. And if something comes up, like I need someone to be someone's trying to grapple Solarka, and I didn't write out her skills. Well, does it make sense for Solarka to be athletic? Of course, it makes sense for Solarka to be proficient in athletics. So I'll add a proficiency button. You can kind of do it on the fly. But having an attack modifier, having hit points, having saves, having AC, you don't need the ability scores, but having appropriate modifiers for the rolls is good. And so you can make a really, really minimalist stat block. And I did. What I wish I had done is create a couple of flavorful, distinctive actions for each of them. Give Ilya something with poison. Give Solarka something from the Artificer spell list or from the Rune Knight abilities of the fighter. Something like that would be I think a good way to add this. Give Thora something from the Soul Knife Rogue list, which is how I would build her if I built her as a full character. But so that's where I think I didn't do a great job manifesting these NPCs into the battle. But I'm glad that I did. I think it was good, and I liked letting the players roll for those NPCs. It gave them some extra engagement. I liked that. So minions grouping lesser monsters as swarms. That's one thing I think I could have done that would have been a lot better and really improved the combat, I think, from all sides, including making it run quicker and easier. I would have been making far fewer rolls. And it would have been easy to multiply that damage. The damage that regular Sawa can do is pretty small. It's been really easy to multiply that damage up. Better flavorful actions for allied NPCs, but I do like including the allied NPCs. If you can create more flavorful actions, just giving the characters over to the players and letting them run them as secondary characters. Especially in a big combat, you're waiting a long time between your turns, and so having a second turn helps. It's good. It's a good thing to do. And if a player doesn't want to do that, then don't make them. Someone might be cool running two, or you run the extra one. It's okay. So that would be my suggestion. And again, with allied NPCs, really minimalist stat block. Modifiers, don't worry about ability scores, and a couple flavorful actions, which you can totally borrow from things that are already in the book. You don't have to make those things up, just from an appropriate class. So something roguish for Ilya, or maybe rangery. I haven't really decided. Something fighter or artificer for Solarka, something rogue for Thora, and I'm set. The other thing that is difficult about running big encounters is knowing when it's too big. Now, this encounter was meant to be two. There was sort of a two-phase thing here. The Saugan arrive. We're fighting the Saugan. It's swashbuckly and chaotic. Tommel and the Baron and a couple more Saugan arrive, and they go inland. And the little Saugan at the docks slow down the players while Tommel and the Baron get to where they're going, and then there's a second encounter there. Right? That's kind of the intention. Obviously, Ari intercepted Tommel. He left the rest of the fight to his friends and intercepted Tommel. This is not necessarily the wrong. I'm not saying this is the wrong thing to do, but I'm saying it made this encounter even bigger than I anticipated it being, and that complicated stuff. There are definitely ways I could have forced it to be what I wanted it, or what I had planned it to be. I don't dislike what it became, but there are definitely ways I could have forced it to be what I planned it to be, but I don't really want to force a combat encounter to adhere to my plans. Once my plans are gone, it's on me to improvise. It's part of the fun part of being a GM. If you really hate that, then it's okay to force it. I could have put a civilian in danger close to Ari and done the Green Goblin thing, right? Let's make Spider-Man choose. Are you going to chase me, or are you going to defend the helpless? And Ari's heroic enough that he'd have gone and helped the helpless while Tommel got away. Or, reward Eric for wanting to intercept the villain by having the Saugan Baron, peel off and knock Ari away, giving Tommel time to go, which would make the follow-up encounter easier, but still preserve the two-phase structure that I had originally planned. So those are ways I could have done that better without invalidating player actions. And that's, I think, the really important thing for me when my plans go out of whack is I don't want to invalidate anything that the players are trying to do just by saying no, this doesn't work, or well, too bad, the bad guy gets away, that kind of thing. I don't like to do that. Sometimes it happens, but I don't like to do that. And so, but there are ways I could have preserved the interesting two-phase structure of the encounter without railroading. Um, yeah, so I think I could have done that. So that's another thing I could have probably improved here. A very hard thing to do, especially on a map, but I think a rewarding thing would have been to try and represent the chaos of civilians getting in the way by adding a little bit of a skill challenge to this combat. I know this combat totally wasn't complicated enough, but I think it would have been a very interesting added an interesting dimension of this as like a layer action on initiative count 20 or 0 or something like that. The crowd surges. Kind of had this in the ballroom fight in Ondare back in the vampire arc. It could have done something kind of like that, and I think that would have been interesting. But on the other hand, I don't know if I wanted to make this encounter any harder for the player characters. So maybe that would have been, or it would have at least required a different kind of balancing. But when you have a big encounter like this, I would recommend some kind of element that's not just fighting monsters with hit points. Something to add a little bit of spice and make this encounter a little different from the other ones that they've had. I think that would have improved it a little bit. Not that it was bad. Again, not that I dislike what we did or what the encounter turned into, but these are ways might have been a little smoother, maybe a little better. But you live and learn, right? That's how GMing works, how playing any kind of RPG works. Anyway, that's all of our questions, and that's kind of my breakdown on where this fight was going that I liked, and where this fight was going that I thought could have gone better. Um, Obviously, we stopped at a very dramatic point, and we're not yet to the most dramatic point. So, hope you will be able to watch this Monday when we drop the next episode of Khyber Shards. We'll have another Khyber Shards answers next Friday, if all goes well. It being December, who knows how scheduling will work, but we'll try. And if you'd like to get in touch with us in the meantime or submit questions for next Khyber Shards answers, you can do so in the comments, or you can do so over on our Discord, and you find a link to that in the description down below. And until next time, thanks for rolling with us.